All right. Okay, let's go ahead and start where we left off in the last video. As you can see, we've laid out our text. Now let's talk about ways that we can create some differentiation between sections of text and sections of content within our page. Now I'm going to cover several things, but I'm going to cover them somewhat quickly. Now, let's go ahead and jump through this and talk about some very simple ways of creating differentiation. If I go back and I show you the example, one of the most simple ways of creating differentiation would be with what's called a break line. Break line can be any number of different types of lines, shapes, graphics. You'll see these a lot in newspapers, magazines, newsletters, something to differentiate, say, the title from the content, maybe a date line, something like this. You'll see a break line a lot used to differentiate major sections of the content from one another. It's not necessary to overuse the break line, though, or it's very important not to overuse the break line. You don't need them between columns. You notice how we have what essentially is sort of an invisible separator. Oh, let's make that go away. Invisible separator between the different columns just by simply staying within the columns we set up in the first video. By staying within these columns, we create those invisible separators. So we don't necessarily need any kind of break line here, and we wouldn't want one because all of these columns are part of the same story. So break line is a very easy thing to create. What I'm going to do is zoom in so that you guys can see how we're going to create this. First, what we're going to do is move over and find our line tool, and we're simply going to draw a line. Now I usually will hold the shift button. The shift button will lock the direction of the line in place. It will be basically every 45 degrees. So it'll be basically here, here, or here. So if you want it just very straight, hold shift and it will stay in line. For some reason my text wrap keeps turning on, so I'll keep turning it off. Now, you'll notice how nothing has really happened. This is because while the line is there, I really don't have a stroke with it. If I go up and just hit this up button, what I have is stroke, size of the stroke, and the type of the stroke. So I want to give it some size. Okay, now I can make this pretty large if I wanted it to be. I could change the color if I wanted it to change the color. I'm just going to choose green, blue. I'll just choose that green. Look at it in print view. Okay, it's kind of simple, right? And if I'd like, I can go back in and then change the type of break line. So if I would like 2 lines, I could do that. If I wanted to make it something more like some diamonds, I could do that. If I want to make it dots, maybe up the size a little bit. Alright, that's not bad. Nice break line between the headlines. I'm just using my arrows to tap it up, tap it down. Okay. So, nice break line. Easy peasy, not a problem at all to create. Okay. If I wanted to, I could also probably add an effect, although that might be too dramatic for what I'm trying to work with. It's really your choice. Just see if that's something that would be necessary. I'm not sure it is in mine. Yeah, I don't like it, so I'm going to go back in and just turn that effect off. Drop shadow, and we'll kill the effect. There we go. Okay. All right. So it's a break line. You can make them vertical, horizontal, any direction you want, but this is a fairly easy way of creating separation. Now, a drop letter is another way of creating some, let's just say, embellishment here. Let me adjust this real quick. Okay. I'm going to reset some of these. And we don't need bold, so we'll do regular. With no stroke. Okay. There we are. All right, everything is reset. Now let's go ahead and talk about how we would do nice drop letter. Now you really don't have to do this. Just dropping this in, coming in saying this is 12-point font, doing our basic formatting, first line indent if you wanted to do this, coming in, first line, 12-point font. That's enough to make sure that everything in the article is indented. Now if you wanted a drop letter, what you would do is highlight this first one and delete, put 0 for your first line indent. But you would just be adjusting the first line indent on this first paragraph, not throughout the whole project. Then you would select the very first letter and move in to where you see these options here. This first is for the drop cap. It says how large do you want the drop cap. The second is, do you want more than one letter? So if I simply clicked up, you would see that I would start creating larger and larger and larger drop caps. If I hit up on the second option, it starts making larger or more and more letters drop caps. Sometimes I'll use this, sometimes I won't. It's really just a matter of what type of document I'm creating. You know, something with a little bit more embellishment sometimes looks nice with a drop cap. You can also change the color if you'd like. So if I wanted that to be red or blue, let's make it something that stands out. Let's go orange again. There we go. So you can highlight that particular letter and simply change that color. Okay, so that's another way of making something stand out. Now let's talk about using insets. Now we talked about using an inset here, but we can also use an inset to create, and I just turned off print mode. I'm going back into design mode with the W key. We can also use insets to create a section of our text that perhaps maybe is an additional piece of information. For example, if the article as a whole is, say, a story about my dog, and maybe I wanted to include a piece of information in this empty spot here about where individuals can go online to find adoption centers in their area. What I might do is this. What I might do is go in and choose a shape, let's say the rectangle tool, and I'm going to create a rectangle within my columns. Within my column, I'm going to then choose a color that works here. I'm going to choose something that's inside, like that green that's on the dog's face. There it is. Nice. Okay. roughly the same color that's there. This is a little bit off, but this will work. Maybe I go a little bit inside. Oh, maybe I extend this a little bit into the gutter. See how that looks. Let's stay inside the column. Okay. And now what I'd want to do is just go ahead and put some text in here. First we would put a headline. I'm going to build it right here, and we'll put headline, and let's choose, I'm just going to choose a nice sans serif font like Impact. Size this up to, let's say 18, and we'll say pet adoption. Cool. Pet adoption. Now, it's very important to understand that you don't want your text to be right on the edge of an inset. In other words, you don't want your text to be right pushed up against the edge like this. You want to always give yourself just a wee bit, just a little bit. I turned off the word wrap. Just a little bit of space on the inside. So, say pet adoption. Cool. Pet adoption sites. Nice. And now I go back into text, and I'm going to do the same thing. Just build another big text box. Another big text box in here, and we're just going to use some placeholder text here. There's our placeholder text. I'm going to size this down to 10-point font, and we'll just put it like this. Now we may put websites, we may put dates, we may put other information in here, but a couple of things we'll want to draw your attention to. First off, notice how I am not putting the text all the way up on the line. Now, I certainly have the column that I created in the first video that goes all the way here. But if I work within in this column all the way over to the margins, you see how the text would go all the way to the edge of the inset. This is something we want to avoid. We want to give ourselves just the smallest amount of gutter inside this inset that we're creating. This creates a little bit of visual tension in our design. Makes it a little bit easier for our audience to see what we're working with, and the design flows just a little bit better overall. So, doesn't look half bad. So if we had pet adoption sites, and then we have blah, 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 all this information about pet adoption sites down here. Now if we looked at this on the page, I'm going to change this color just because it's bugging me. Let's make it the same color we had this one. There we go. So if we have pet adoption sites down here, we can tell this is actually a different piece of content than the rest of our article. This is the benefit of having insets like this. If we had, I love the puppy dog. Let me see, this actually goes off the screen. We'll just need to size that down a bit. Love the puppy dog. Give ourselves some space. There we go. Nice. And we certainly do not want a hyphen in a quote. So I love the puppy dog. puppy dog. There we go. So we've got one inset that handles something like, say, a quote that we might want to pull from our article. We've got another one that might be something like, say, additional information the reader might want to take. This is a great way we can use insets. Okay. Now, if we wanted to do something kind of fun here, I want to draw your attention to something else that we've got. Insets can also be used in an interesting sort of way if you actually do some fun transforming. We call this directional conversion. Right here is the tool we're going to use. Now let me show you how this might work. So what if I wanted to play around with, and I'm going to move this out of the way, what if I wanted to play around with the text that we have in here? I'm going to select all my text, I'm just going to move it off to the side. So all of that, and move it off to the side. Just for now. Okay? We're going to take this and shrink it up so it stays out of our way. So, what if I wanted to create a nice background for the work that I'm about to do? In this case, I'm going to create a rectangle, and then I'm going to color it, let's say, that same color blue. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is, let's just lower the opacity to make it very pale. Nice. Okay. Now, there's two tools that will allow us to do some things like, I played around with this earlier. We can actually see how the words wrap around this. One would be our direct selection tool. Two would be our convert direction point tool. And a direct select tool, turn this off again. What we can do is actually select any point. You see the individual points here. Select any point, and come here. There we go. And adjust this to a size that we might want. So if I wanted to create a custom shape, I certainly could do that. You just back that up. Back to, nice rectangle. Okay. Under our convert direction point tool, we also have what's called the pin tool. The pin tool allows us to add points wherever we might want them. So if I go in and I add a point right in the middle here, what I can do is grab the middle, again click off first, grab the middle, and maybe drag it down. Now with the convert tool, again pin, convert direction point, when I click and hold, you'll see I get a couple of handles. These handles allow me to create smoother curves. If you notice, as I move this around, I start seeing curves in my design. All right, so now I have a curved design. So, why is this important? Well, this is important if I wanted to actually come in and move, say, my text. I'm going to bring these three pieces of text into this design. If I wanted them then to, I'm going to send this box to the back. If I wanted this text to then curve within the shape that I built, let's size this up. Actually, that'll be fine. 12 points should be fine. Okay, so if I wanted this to work and to wrap around the shape, just like what I've got right here, it's actually fairly easy. First, what I would do is just select the shape. There it is. Okay. Next, I would go to wrapping, and then I would wrap the shape. Okay. Now we have a problem. The problem is that with my normal word wrapping, it pushes everything away from the shape. What we want is actually to contain our text inside the shape. Well, that's when we would invert the text wrap. When we invert, what happens is that essentially the text only is allowed to exist within the shape that we are text wrapping. So in this case, here I would want to shrink my text box. Maybe shrink my text box a little bit more. Maybe shrink it or extend it here. And so now I would have all my text within this shape that I've created. If I wanted to then bring in something like my dog bone here, the text still wraps around that. If I wanted to bring in my additional inset, the text would still wrap around that. But ultimately, the text is always contained within this shape that I've created. So this is another way that we can actually use some of the tools, some of the tools in InDesign to create some really interesting and fun differentiations between different elements of text and graphics within InDesign. So I know this has gone on a little bit long, but hope this has been helpful. Feel free to ask if you have any questions, and I will talk to you next time.